Lenore, the wife of my eldest son, who always treats me like a stranger, visited our home alone. It was rare to see her without my eldest son, Ralph. So as I welcomed her in, she bluntly stated, "Don't come to the wedding, Jody. Ralph and I are of different class." I was taken aback by Lenore's rudeness, which wasn't entirely new, but I never expected her to go this far. Confused, I asked, "What do you mean by that?" Lenore sighed heavily, as if looking down on me, and began, "I hate how clueless you are. I graduated from a top university and work at the same prestigious trading company as Ralph. But Jody, she went to a third-rate college and is just an insurance salesperson. It's embarrassing to have someone who does a job anyone could do as part of my family." Annoyed, I replied, "Could you not look down on insurance sales? It's not an embarrassing job, you know." As soon as I said this, Lenore retorted with a nasty smile. "Oh, Jody's angry, scary. Anyway, it's already decided. Ralph will surely agree with me." Exhausted, I simply said, "Okay." I'm Jody, 65 years old, and I currently work in insurance sales. I've been with the same company since graduation, now working under employment. It's a tough job dealing with failed contracts and customer complaints, but it's rewarding, especially when I land a big new contract and everyone in the sales department congratulates me. I'm a single mother now. My husband and I had differing values, constantly arguing. Ralph, our son, was old enough to witness these unpleasant times. Eventually, the marriage filled with arguments ended, and my husband refused to take Ralph with him. Despite financial uncertainties, I chose to raise Ralph myself. Balancing work and parenting, especially through his rebellious phase, was challenging, but I managed. "The hard-working Ralph I want to marry, and I'd like you to meet her," Ralph told me. It was Lenore, a colleague he grew close to at work. Today was the day Ralph would bring Lenore over. Though Ralph and I lived together, he went out to pick up Lenore. The doorbell rang, and there they were. "Nice to meet you. I'm Lenore. Sorry for the sudden visit. I brought you something small," Ralph and Lenore said, as she handed me a paper bag with famous cookies from a well-known department store. "Oh my, you didn't have to go through the trouble. Thank you." "No, it's just a small gesture," Lenore modestly gestured. "Thank you for the lovely gift. Please come in," I invited Ralph and Lenore in with a smile. We started with casual conversation. Lenore shared about her upbringing, how she and Ralph got close, and even Ralph's work life, which she spoke of fondly. Then Lenore curiously asked me, "By the way, what do you do for work, Jody?" Seeing no harm, I cheerfully responded, "I'm in insurance sales." At that moment, I noticed Lenore's smile twist. Was I seeing things? I looked at her face again, but it had returned to normal. We continued with the conversation, and then wrapped up the evening. That momentary expression on Lenore's face. What was it all about? Since then, Ralph started bringing Lenore around more often. The matter at hand was wedding preparations. Since my ex-husband definitely won't be attending, I need to do the things Ralph's dad would have done. This was expected ever since my ex refused to take custody of Ralph. I have a lot to cover. Toasts, responses to letters from the mom, and more. I need to start thinking about what to say soon. There's no time to waste, but with work being so busy, it's hard to find the time, especially with Lenore's increasing visits. My personal time is dwindling. While contemplating this, I continued to entertain Lenore's queries. Suddenly, Lenore started talking about her dress. "I absolutely want a dress with bright blue and sequins scattered all over it. It would look so beautiful. By the way, Jody, what kind of dress did you wear at your wedding?" I was caught off guard. Ralph should have told her I'm already divorced. Ralph interrupted, putting his hand on Lenore's shoulder. "Oh, it's okay. I mean, even if you're divorced, it's all in the past, right? I'd be too embarrassed and miserable to ever get divorced. But then, Jody, you're a stranger to me, so I can't really understand your feelings," Lenore said with a laugh. Feeling uncomfortable, I forced a smile and changed the subject. Ralph looked at me, his face full of apology. Lenore, on the other hand, looked triumphantly at me. Her attitude was becoming increasingly troubling, and her constant reference to me as a stranger was concerning. Every time something came up, she'd say, "Jody's a stranger after all." Ralph would always admonish her, but Lenore seemed unfazed. Maybe she really doesn't have a good impression of me. Her attitude was deteriorating. Even Ralph seemed to be feeling uneasy about her lately. I was concerned about the thoughtful gestures he'd sometimes make. In the midst of all this, Lenore came to visit alone. I wondered who it could be when the doorbell rang, and there she was standing by herself. I was used to seeing her with Ralph, but I decided to let her in, though it felt a bit odd with Ralph not around. Right at the entrance, Lenore looked down on me. "Jody, our class is different, so please don't come to the wedding," she said. I was taken aback by her abrupt rudeness. "What do you mean?" I asked, frowning. I knew Lenore could be impolite, but this was beyond my expectations. Lenore sighed heavily. "I just can't stand your cluelessness, Jody. I graduated from a top university and work in a top trading company like Ralph, but you're just an insurance salesperson from a third-rate college. It's embarrassing to have someone like you in our family," she said with a look of utter disdain. I retorted, irked, "Could you please not look down on insurance work? It's not the shameful job you think it is." As soon as I stood up to her, she sneered, "Jody's angry, scary. Anyway, this is decided. Ralph will surely agree with me," Lenore exclaimed with a nasty smile. She came here without even discussing it with Ralph. I was astounded by Lenore's lack of planning. The idea that the groom's mom wouldn't attend the wedding was unheard of. Then I realized Lenore had initially been hiding her true self. Exhausted from dealing with Lenore, I simply said, "Understood," and sent Lenore home. But privately, I was quite irritated. Despite my tiredness, I didn't want someone as rude as Lenore marrying my dear Ralph. However, the wedding date was already set, and there was only about a week left. What should I do? I was in deep thought. That's it. I had an idea. Then came the wedding day. At the reception, Lenore's friends in flashy outfits were greeting guests and collecting congratulatory money. It seems that the parents-in-law are in Lenore's dressing room. I was secretly waiting in Ralph's dressing room, of course, without letting Lenore know. I had given Ralph a voice recorder, telling him about my interaction with Lenore that day. Luckily, I had recorded it using a voice recorder I happened to have for work. Initially disturbed, Ralph quickly understood after hearing the recording. In the end, Ralph was crying and got very angry for me. He decided to cancel the wedding and break off the engagement with Lenore. But it was just a week away from the wedding. Canceling now would incur a hefty cancellation fee, so we decided to give Lenore a bit of a painful lesson. Finally, the wedding began. As it was a restaurant wedding, the ceremony itself felt more like a casual reception. I decided to wait near a door close to the exit where I could see inside without being noticed by Lenore. Next, the entrance of the bride and groom was announced. The host opened the doors for Ralph and Lenore to enter. Initially smiling, Lenore's expression froze as she glanced around and muttered. Understandably so, on the wedding day, all the relatives were inexplicably absent. It made sense for Ralph's relatives to be missing. Ralph and I had gone around to each relative, bowing our heads and asking them not to attend. But Lenore's relatives were also absent. The seats were all empty. The parents-in-law seemed awkwardly scanning around. They probably couldn't understand why no one was sitting at the relatives' tables. Lenore's friends, too, seemed perplexed upon seeing two completely empty tables, quietly discussing something among themselves. In this situation, Ralph borrowed a microphone from the host and announced, "The wedding is canceled, and this will be a dinner party instead," laughing loudly. "What?" exclaimed Lenore. But this wasn't the end of the revenge on Lenore. As the venue descended into chaos, Ralph continued, "Today, I was supposed to marry Lenore standing beside me. However, Lenore has been treating my mom as a stranger and has always been terrible to her. She even commanded that my mom not attend today's wedding. Here's the proof." Then, the audio from that day played in the hall. "Don't come to the wedding because Jod and I are of different classes." The ugly laughter of Lenore echoed along with her words. Lenore's dad, Hui, and mom, Tiana, seemed to have just learned the reason for my absence from the wedding. They asked Lenora in a shaken voice, "Hey, Lenore, what's this about?" Lenore stood there in her dress, her face turning pale. Ralph calmly questioned Lenore, "So, do you understand why this happened?" Lenore, seemingly distraught, yelled in an annoying tone, "How would I know?" The parents-in-law were too overwhelmed by the unfolding truths to respond. Since no one was answering, Ralph spoke up again more energetically. Then let's have this person explain, it's my mom. With Ralph's cue, a staff member opened the door on the exit side. Bathed in the spotlight, I stood before Ralph, Lenore, and the parents-in-law. At that moment, Lenore glared at me furiously. It's all your fault. You ruined my wedding, you worthless old hag from a third-rate university and a third-rate company. Lenore's hair was a mess, partly ruined by the disturbed parents-in-law. The dress was misshapen, ruining the beautiful sequined gown. Lenore, what are you saying? That's Ralph's mom. Huai loudly reprimanded her. Yes, Lenore, that's beyond rude. Tiana, her eyes brimming with tears, was appalled by her daughter's disgraceful behavior. It's not rude, Lenore was about to complain to me more when I sternly interrupted her. I get it, Lenore. You don't like me, but I won't tolerate such disdainful attitude towards me, even if I was to be your in-law, I told her. Lenore clicked her tongue, her true nature completely exposed. I didn't know you were like this, Ralph muttered, looking disillusioned. Why do you think Leno's relatives aren't here today? I asked. Lenore turned away, indifferent. Yep, unfortunate. Your lack of understanding, Lenore, is really detestable. I casually threw back the line Lenore had said to me that day. Lenore glared at me, her expression twisted and unbearable to watch. Ralph was also distancing himself from Lenore. You stop it already. That's way too rude to me. Lenore seemed to have completely forgotten her past remarks to me. No, the rude one is you, Ralph retorted, unable to hold back. Huh. I sighed in exasperation and explained, well, the answer is all of Leno's relatives are actually my clients. So, I explained the situation to them and asked them to not attend. Did you know, Lenore? Lenore muttered, stunned. Well, that's Lenore for you. Slow on the uptake. Ralph laughed heartily, showing no sympathy. However, Ralph suddenly stopped laughing and turned serious. No matter how smart you are or which famous company you work for, I can't marry someone who looks down on my mom. My mom is not someone you can belittle. Today the engagement is off, and Lenore and I are strangers. Please never involve yourself with me or my mom again, I said sternly, almost spitting the words out. Lenore and the parents-in-law, their faces red, remained silent, heads bowed. Of course, the engagement was broken, the wedding was canceled, and the event soon ended. The parents-in-law, being sensible people, apologized to Ralph and me multiple times. They also agreed to cover all the expenses of the wedding. The compensation discussion was scheduled for a later date with the parents-in-law and me. Lenore resigned from her job afterward. We hadn't invited anyone from Ralph and Lenore's workplace to the wedding, but rumors about the debacle had spread. Colleagues sympathized with Ralph, but were harsh towards Lenore. In a workplace that values teamwork, Lenore became an outcast. Eventually, unable to withstand the constant bad-mouthing, the mentally strong Lenore quit. One day, she left a resignation letter on her desk and disappeared. Before vanishing, Lenore approached Ralph. I want to get back together with you, she pleaded for reconciliation, and tell everyone at work that I'm not bad. But Ralph refused. Everything with her attitude returning to how things were was impossible. She also came to me several times, asking, tell Ralph to get back together with me, but I ignored all her requests. Lenora is likely disowned by the parents-in-law by now, so where Lenore is and what she's doing is unknown to anyone. Neither Ralph nor I want to know her whereabouts. 3 years have passed, and Ralph and I live peacefully. We remodeled our house with the compensation money from the parents-in-law. Ralph actually married someone else, a nurse introduced by a friend. She's straightforward and fearless, always speaking her mind. Ralph's new wife even offered to live with me, worrying about me being alone. Are your parents okay with this? I asked, and she replied that her parents are happy together and she'd just be a bother. So Ralph's new family and I decided to live together in this remodeled house. Actually, we're about to have one more. Ralph's wife is expecting a baby in about 3 months. Work is busy but fun, and the family will soon become noisier but seemingly more enjoyable. Looking forward to the busier days ahead with a baby, I feel motivated to keep going. Today,
From the moment I could walk and talk, I was Daddy's little helper, trailing around construction sites with a hard hat that swallowed my head. My father, John Armstrong, built his empire from scratch, Armstrong Constructions, and expected me to follow in his footsteps. Not that I minded, the world of blueprints and concrete was as much a part of me as my own skin. Working in Dad's company wasn't just a job, it was my entire life. Relationships? They never quite fit into my schedule. Besides, I had Lucy, my best friend since kindergarten. Lucy was the polar opposite of me, where I saw lines and angles, she saw Friday night dates and flirty dresses. "Anna, you need to get out more," Lucy would laugh, flipping her hair, which was always some shade of the rainbow. Not all men are as boring as concrete. I just shook my head, focused on my spreadsheets and client meetings, until Michael showed up. He transferred from the Atlanta branch as a manager. I remember the first day he walked into the office. He had this easy smile and a way of making everyone feel like they were the most important person in the room. "Anna Armstrong, I've heard a lot about you. All good things, I promise," he said, extending his hand. His grip was firm, confident. "Doubt that. If they told you I'm a pushover, they lied," I replied, raising an eyebrow. He laughed, a genuine, head-back sound. "I guess I'll have to find out for myself." It didn't take long for his charm to work on me. Coffee breaks turned into dinner dates. Dinner dates turned into late nights talking about everything and nothing. Michael wasn't like the guys Lucy dated. He was persistent but respectful, ambitious but grounded. It was refreshing. Terrifying, too, how fast I fell for him. The night he proposed, it was just us, a picnic in the park under the stars. No grand gestures, just an honest confession of love. "Anna, I'm not a man of many words when it comes to feelings, but I know this, I want to spend my life with you. Will you marry me?" "Yes," I said without a second thought. The decision was as solid and straightforward as the foundation of a skyscraper. The morning of my wedding felt like any other day, except for the knot in my stomach and the bouquet of white roses shaking in my hands. "Can't believe I'm doing this," I muttered to myself, staring at my reflection. The girl in the mirror looked like a bride, all dressed in white, but her eyes were wide, like she was about to step off a cliff. "Hey, you look like you're going to a funeral, not your own wedding," Lucy teased, bustling into the room with a bag of makeup and a grin. "Let's add some color to those cheeks." I rolled my eyes, but let her dab my face with powder and paint. "Don't make me look like a clown, okay? It's just Michael out there, not the royal family." Lucy laughed, her hands expertly moving brushes and liners. "Trust me, by the time I'm done with you, Michael's going to fall in love all over again." The ceremony was a blur. Dad walked me down the aisle, his arm a steady weight on mine. "You sure about this, kiddo?" he whispered when we were halfway down. I squeezed his arm. "Yeah, Dad. I'm sure." Michael was waiting at the altar, his smile wide and sure. It anchored me, made my steps lighter. The vows were simple, words I'd heard 100 times in movies and at friends' weddings, but they felt different coming from my lips, promising forever to the man in front of me. Sarah, Michael's sister, came with her 2 little ones, thanking me for making her brother the happiest man alive. "I don't know how you did it, taming my wild brother," she joked as we watched Michael dancing with some of our nieces and nephews. "Just had to use the right bait," I quipped, watching him with a mixture of adoration and amusement. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of thank you cards and unwrapping gifts. But the biggest change was Michael's idea that I should quit my job and focus on us, on our home. It sounded so old-fashioned, and nothing like the life I'd envisioned for myself. "You really think I should quit?" I asked one evening, the brochures for new kitchen counters spread on the table between us. "Yeah, babe. Look, you've been at your dad's beck and call since you were a kid. It's time for us now," he said, his hand covering mine. I chewed my lip, looking down at our entwined fingers. "And if I hate it? If I'm a terrible housewife?" He chuckled, squeezing my hand. "Then you go back to work, and we hire a maid." But I've got a feeling you're gonna be great at this. So, I gave my notice at the company. Dad was surprised, but supportive. The last day at the office was bittersweet. I packed up my desk, my heart heavy but hopeful. Maybe Michael was right. Maybe it was time for a new chapter. That night, as I tried a new recipe for dinner, burning the garlic and undercooking the pasta, Michael wrapped his arms around me from behind. "Smells good," he lied, kissing my cheek. I leaned back into him, the familiar fear of change nagging at me. But there was also excitement, a thrill of stepping into the unknown. "We'll see," I said, hoping my new role as a housewife would feel as right as my old one had. 3 years into our marriage, and life had found a rhythm, sort of like the ticking of the clock in our kitchen, steady, predictable, but sometimes a bit too silent. Michael had scored a big promotion at the company, thanks to Dad. The pay was good, really good. We should have been on top of the world, dreaming up nursery colors and picking out baby names. But the baby part, well, it just wasn't happening. I had seen doctors, had tests done, and everything came back normal. "Just give it time," the doctor told me, flashing a smile that was probably meant to be comforting. So, I waited, filling my days with projects around the house, turning our home into something out of a magazine. During this time, Lucy dropped a bomb. She was pregnant. The news hit me hard, though I masked my shock with a smile. "That's amazing, Luce. Who's the dad?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. She shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my gaze. "Oh, you don't know him. Just someone I met." She quickly changed the subject. A few months later, she had a baby boy. I got her a nice gift, something chic yet practical, a designer baby bag. "You're a lifesaver, Anna," she said, hugging me with one arm while cradling her son in the other. Meanwhile, Michael started spending more weekends at his sister Sarah's place. He said she needed help with the kids since she was doing it all alone. "I just want to make sure they're okay," he explained one Friday as he packed a small overnight bag. "Maybe I could come with you? Help out a bit?" I suggested. Sarah was family, after all, and I liked playing aunt. No, he brushed off my offer with a quick wave of his hand. "It's a lot of chaos with the kids. I don't want to drag you into it. I'll manage." So, I started buying little gifts for the kids, books, games, things to keep them busy. "Send these along with you," I'd say, handing over the toys. Michael would smile, thank me, and head off. But the doubts began creeping in. Little things at first. The way he'd avoid my gaze when talking about his weekends. The rushed phone calls he'd end the moment I walked into the room. One day, I decided to talk to him about it. I waited for him in the living room, rehearsing what I would say. When he walked in, looking tired, my heart softened a bit, but I pressed on. "Michael, are you sure everything's okay with Sarah and the kids? Maybe I could help her out during the week. I have free time, you know." I pushed, watching his reaction closely. He hesitated, then shook his head. "No, I told you, it's under control. You don't need to worry about it." Something in his tone didn't sit right with me. It felt like he was hiding something. But I didn't want to push him further right then. I spent that Saturday like any other, deep cleaning the house, while Michael was helping Sarah with the kids. I vacuumed, dusted, and scrubbed. By mid-afternoon, my energy waned, and I decided a change of scenery might do me good. A quick trip to the mall for new curtains seemed like the perfect excuse to get out. As I turned the corner near the food court, I froze. There was Sarah, holding her children's hands. They were laughing, a carefree moment that felt so alien to my current state. "Sarah," I called out, my voice a little too eager. She looked up, a bit startled, then smiled. "Anna, what a surprise. How are you?" "I'm good, just grabbing some things for the house." "And Michael, is he here? Helping you out today?" I probed, trying to sound casual. Sarah's face shifted slightly, a flicker of confusion passing over her features. "Michael? No, he hasn't been here today." Was he supposed to be? My heart sank, but I masked it with a quick laugh. Oh, I must have misunderstood. I thought he was spending the day with you and the kids. No, the last time Michael came over was, well, it's been a few weeks, actually. We've just been texting, mostly. Is everything okay? Sarah asked, now looking concerned. Yeah, everything's fine. Just mix-ups, you know? I replied, my mind racing. Well, I better keep shopping. Those curtains won't pick themselves. Sure, let me know if you want to grab a coffee or something, Sarah said, as we parted ways. I nodded, but as soon as she was out of sight, my legs carried me quickly away, my heart pounding in my chest. Michael had lied. He wasn't with Sarah, he hadn't been for weeks. The realization hit me like a slap in the face. Where was he, then? And why lie about it? The house was quiet when I got back, too quiet, echoing with the loud doubts now filling my head. I threw my keys on the table and sank into a chair. My hands trembled slightly as I took out my phone. I needed answers, and there was only one way to get them. I dialed Michael's number, my fingers numb and cold. He picked up after the second ring. Hey babe, he answered, his voice cheerful. What's up? I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady. Where are you? I'm at Sarah's, helping her out. You know, the usual chaos, he replied, a hint of strain now audible behind his casual tone. In the background, I could hear the unmistakable sound of children laughing. My grip on the phone tightened. Sounds like you're having fun, I said, trying to sound nonchalant. Yeah, Sarah had to run some errands. Left me in charge of the fort, he chuckled, and more laughter echoed behind him. The lie was so blatant, so effortless. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. Sarah wasn't running errands, I had just seen her, relaxed and shopping, not a care in the world. Okay, take care then, I said quietly, my throat tight. Love you, he said quickly, and before I could respond, he had hung up. I sat there alone, the silence of the house suffocating me, tears rolling down my cheeks. The man I loved, the man I had devoted my life to, was deceiving me. It hurt, more than I could have imagined. In the end, I wiped away my tears and headed to his home office. He'd always been private about his work, but now, every secretive moment felt suspicious. Stepping into his office felt like crossing into forbidden territory. Papers were stacked neatly on his desk, books lined the shelves in an orderly fashion, everything as it should be, except my heart pounding loud in my chest. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. Proof? A confession scribbled on a post-it note? I sifted through papers, opened drawers, my hands shaking slightly. Then I saw it, tucked into a book on the shelf, a photograph that knocked the air from my lungs. It was Michael, Lucy, and her little boy, all smiling at a picnic. Michael had his arm around Lucy, and they looked happy. Too happy. The kind of happy that you are when you're more than just friends. A cold wave of realization washed over me. The lies, the absences, it all made a sick sort of sense now. But I needed more than a photo and my suspicions. I needed something concrete before I could confront him. First thing Monday, I called a detective agency, explained my situation, and hired someone. I just need to know for sure, I told the investigator. His assurance was professional, but my heart still felt like it was trapped in a vice. Michael returned Sunday evening, acting like everything was normal. Hey, babe, Sarah really appreciated the help. You're an angel for sending those gifts, he said, pecking me on the cheek. I forced a smile, kept the dinner conversation light, hiding the turmoil inside. Glad to help, I replied, my voice steady, despite the scream inside my head. I even talked to Lucy on the phone that week. She was her usual bubbly self, chatting about her son, making plans for coffee. It was surreal, hearing her voice, knowing she might be the reason my marriage was falling apart. That Friday, as Michael packed for another weekend at his sister's, his alleged sister's, I handed him a bag of gifts for the kids. Say hi to Sarah and the kids for me, I said, a brittle smile on my face. After he left, the detective called. We need to meet, he said, his voice grave. I have something you should see. We met at a park, a neutral space filled with the laughter of children and the barks of dogs, a stark contrast to the dark cloud hanging over me. He handed me an envelope. Inside were photographs and a report, dates, times, places. Michael and Lucy, together, not just friendly but intimate. My hands trembled as I flipped through the evidence, each image a stab in the heart. I'm sorry, Mrs. Thompson, the detective said. His face was a mask of professionalism, but his eyes were kind. If there's anything else we can do. I shook my head, folding the envelope closed. No, it's more than enough. The first thing I did was pack all of Michael's belongings. Every shirt, every pair of shoes, every scrap of him that lingered in our shared spaces, I boxed up methodically. It was mechanical, each fold away my pain. Once everything was packed, I didn't just leave it by the door or throw it out, I sent it all to Lucy's place. Let her deal with the mess she helped create. I called the courier, my voice calm, my instructions clear. Next, I changed the locks. No more would Michael walk freely through these doors as if he hadn't torn our life apart. This symbolic gesture felt like sealing off my heart from further damage. With the house now feeling less like ours and more like my own, I drove to my parents' house. My parents were shocked as I told them everything, the affair, the lies, the duplicity. Dad, usually so calm and composed, grew visibly angry. You need to divorce him, Anna. No second chances, he said sternly, his disappointment in Michael palpable. I nodded, the resolve settling in. I had already filled out the divorce papers, each line a nail in the coffin of my marriage. As evening fell, my phone started buzzing. Calls from Michael. Texts. Voicemails. I ignored them all. Lucy also tried to reach out, her messages a mix of confusion and panic. I silenced my phone, unwilling to hear their excuses or lies. Late in the evening, a car pulled up. I watched from the window as Michael stepped out. He walked up to the front door and rang the bell. When I opened the door, Michael's face was a mix of confusion and anger. Anna, why did you send all my stuff to Lucy? What's going on? His feigned ignorance fueled my anger. I smiled, cold and hard. And how do you know your stuff is with Lucy? Weren't you supposed to be at your sister's? The color drained from his face as he realized the trap he'd walked into. My father stepped forward, his presence formidable. I trusted you, Dad said, his voice thunderous. I was going to make you my successor, and you repay me by cheating on my daughter? Michael stumbled backward slightly, as if the words were physical blows. I'm sorry, I made a mistake. It meant nothing, I swear. I scoffed. It meant nothing? You destroyed our marriage for something that meant nothing? I didn't mean for any of this to happen, Michael pleaded, falling to his knees. Please, Anna, I can fix this. I stepped forward, the divorce papers in hand. Here, I said, thrusting the papers toward him. I want you gone. From my life, from my house, and from my father's company. Michael took the papers, his hands shaking. He looked up at me, eyes brimming with tears, but I felt nothing but revulsion. Dad turned to him, his final words cutting through the tense air. You're fired. And expect a call from my lawyer. We'll be seeking every penny back for what you've done. Michael, defeated and broken, slowly got to his feet and walked away, his future as shattered as the life he left behind. I watched him go, feeling a mix of relief and pain. The chapter of my life involving Michael was closed. A few days after the confrontation, my phone rang. The number was familiar, too familiar. It was Lucy. I hesitated but answered, steeling myself for the conversation. Anna, why did I get a request for financial compensation in the mail? Lucy's voice was tense, a mix of confusion and anger. I'm suing you for the damage you caused by having an affair with my husband. I said, my voice calm but firm. Anna, come on, you have to understand, I never meant to hurt you, she started, her voice shaky. I don't need your excuses, Lucy. You knew exactly what you were doing, I interrupted, not willing to hear her justify her actions. Lucy's tone shifted, the desperation clear in her voice. You have everything, Anna. I've always been in your shadow, struggling, while everything was handed to you. Can't you feel sorry for me, just this once? I can't, Lucy. Not for this. You crossed a line, I replied, my resolve hardening. She let out a bitter laugh. I always envied you, Anna. Your perfect life, your perfect job. I thought maybe for once I could have something that made me feel worth something too. That didn't give you the right to destroy my marriage, I said coldly, feeling the old pain mixed with fresh anger. Later that week, my lawyer called to discuss Michael's latest move. He's asking for mediation to settle the divorce terms, Anna. It would avoid a trial, keep things less public, he explained. After a moment of thought, I agreed. The day of the mediation, I walked into the lawyer's office, every step firm, my heart guarded behind a wall of icy determination. Michael was already there, looking worn and remorseful. I didn't buy it for a second. As we sat down, Michael's lawyer laid out their terms. It was almost laughable, how little he thought he could get away with giving up. No, I said simply, meeting Michael's gaze for the first time that day. He'll also pay for the damage caused. And he will renounce any claims to my father's company and my properties. After hours of negotiation, pushed by his lawyer, Michael agreed. He would compensate me financially for the betrayal and cover the legal demands against Lucy. He also formally renounced all claims to any part of my family's assets. As the final papers were signed, a weight lifted off my shoulders. The money wasn't a salve for the betrayal, but it was accountability, something Michael had to recognize and feel. I hope you find what you're looking for, Michael, I said as we parted, not sure if I meant it. I'm sorry, Anna. Truly, he replied, his voice low. It's been a few months since the dust settled on my divorce. I heard through the grapevine that Michael remarried quickly, Lucy, of all people. But that union crumbled faster than it formed when he found out her son wasn't his. Turns out, Lucy was already pregnant when she decided to weave her web around Michael. Now, she's struggling, raising the kid on her own, scrambling to make ends meet. As for Michael, his career never recovered. He bounces around, picking up whatever work he can find. Last I heard, he was doing some low-end jobs, nothing that would ever match up to the life we had planned together. As for me, I threw myself into my work. One crisp morning, I was early at the office, the first to arrive as usual. That's when my dad came in, his steps echoing in the empty hallway. Morning, Anna, he greeted, his voice breaking through my concentration. Morning, Dad, I replied, minimizing the spreadsheets on my screen. What brings you in so early? He walked over to my desk, a serious look on his face that told me he meant business. I've been thinking, he started, leaning against the edge of my desk. It's about time we talk about expanding the business. I think you're ready to take on more responsibility. I paused, absorbing his words. Are you sure? It's a big step. I've never been more sure of anything, Anna. You've got a sharp mind for business. It's time you use it to steer this company into new waters, he said confidently. I nodded, the weight of his trust in me settling on my shoulders. I'll do my best, Dad. You know I will. I know. That's why I'm suggesting it, he replied with a smile, then turned to leave before pausing at the door. Oh, and there's a community charity event next week. I want you to head it. Show them what the Armstrongs are made of. The days that followed were a blur of activity. Planning the charity event took up most of my time, but it was a welcome distraction. It gave me a sense of purpose, a direction to channel all my energy, something that had nothing to do with my failed marriage. The night of the event, as I stood at the podium, looking out at the crowd of familiar faces, I felt a surge of pride. I had organized this, brought these people together for a good cause. It was my hard work that made this happen, not anyone else's. After the speeches, as people mingled and congratulated me on a successful event, I realized I was starting to feel like myself again. The betrayal, the divorce, it was all part of my past now. Yes, it shaped me, but it didn't define me. My name is Lillian, and if you'd told me a few years ago that my life would flip upside down after one party, I'd have laughed. But that's exactly what happened the night I met Jack at my college graduation party. I was there with friends, just trying to celebrate our freedom from exams and papers, not expecting my entire future to show up. "Hey, Lillian, you gotta meet this guy." My friend Liz pulled up my arm, her eyes twinkling with something I couldn't quite place. "Who is it?" I asked, scanning the crowd for any sign of trouble. "Just a friend of Tom's. He's seen your photos and won't shut up about meeting you," she said as she dragged me through the crowd. We stopped in front of a tall guy with a cheeky grin. "Lillian, meet Jack." "Jack, this is the girl I was telling you about." Jack's smile didn't falter. "Heard a lot about you. All good things, I promise," he said, offering me a hand that felt sure and warm. Something about his upfront manner made me laugh. We chatted more, the conversation easy, flowing naturally. Jack was a manager at a local restaurant, a family business he was proud of. He listened intently, his eyes not wandering off like most would in such settings. By the end of the night, he'd asked me out officially. I said yes without a second thought. Our whirlwind romance was the kind you read about in a rushed summer novel. Within months, we were talking about forever. It was fast, sure, but when you know, you just know. At least, that's how I felt with Jack. "Marry me. Let's not wait. What's the point?" Jack had said one evening, the sunset casting warm glows over his face. "Okay, yes. Let's do it," I answered, the simplicity of the moment wrapping around us like a promise. But if I'd thought my spontaneous decision would lead to a fairy tale, reality was ready to wake me up. And it did, right when I met his mother, Susan, for the first time. We arranged to have dinner at their family restaurant, where the clash began. Susan was a stern woman, her hair pulled back tightly, her eyes scanning me like I was a page in a particularly difficult contract. "So, Lillian, Jack tells us you're eager to start a family," she said, not as a question, but as an accusation. "Yes, we've talked about kids. I've always wanted a big family," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady under her scrutinizing gaze. "And you think you're up to it? Bearing healthy children?" Her words were as sharp as knives, each one aimed carefully to cut. I bit my tongue to keep from snapping back. Instead, I forced a smile. "I understand the concern, but I assure you, I'm more than capable of contributing to the family, in all ways." The dinner passed with heavy air and harder words. Jack was quiet, his usual vibrant self dimmed by his mother's overbearing presence. I left feeling not just evaluated but reduced to a mere function in their family plan. Starting a new job is tough, but when that job is at your in-law's family restaurant and your boss is your mother-in-law, it's a whole different ballgame. From my first day, Susan made it clear I was there to work, not to be pampered because I was the boss's son's wife. I showed up early, dressed in the uniform that was a bit too big and smelled faintly of fry oil from previous wearers. Susan was already there, clipboard in hand, eyes scanning the restaurant like a hawk. "You're early, good. We start you off with cleaning. Every good employee knows the place from scrubbed toilets to polished silver," she declared without a greeting. I nodded, taking the bucket and cloth she shoved into my hands. "Where should I start?" "Bathrooms, then move to the dining area. After that, help in the kitchen. We'll see if you can handle simple tasks before we put you anywhere near customers," Susan instructed, her tone leaving no room for argument. Lunch rush brought a new kind of chaos. Susan stationed me at the dish station, a clear view of the entire operation, but none of the glory. Jack came in to check on the front, barely acknowledging my presence as he discussed orders with the chefs. "Hey, babe, need any help?" I managed to catch him during a brief lull. Jack glanced at his mother, then back at me. Keep at it. You're doing fine. Fine doesn't feel quite right from here. I shot back, a little stung by his dismissiveness. Jack's face tightened, a look I was coming to know meant he was stuck between me and his mother. She thinks it's good for everyone to start at the bottom. Prove yourself, and she'll ease up. Promise. The promise felt hollow as I watched him walk away, back to laughing and chatting easily with the other staff. Meanwhile, I was left with prune hands and a sour taste in my mouth, wondering how long this proving myself would take. One particularly busy evening, as I was setting up for a big party, Susan cornered me in the pantry. "Lillian, the napkins are folded wrong. Do them again. And make sure the table settings are perfect. Our reputation is not up for debate because you can't follow simple instructions." I clenched my jaw, refolding the napkins. "I did them exactly as you showed me." Susan snatched one up, refolding it with sharp, practiced flicks. "Like this. Pay attention. I won't have my son married to someone who can't manage basic tasks." Her words stung, and I fought back the urge to snap. Instead, I focused on the napkins, each fold a reminder that I was more than she saw. It was just another hectic lunch rush at the restaurant when it hit me, a wave of dizziness so strong I had to grip the edge of the kitchen counter to keep from falling. "I need a minute," I muttered to no one in particular, easing myself into the back room where the noise dulled to a dull roar. Once I was sure I wouldn't just keel over, I grabbed my purse and headed to Jack, who was busy at the cash register. "Jack, I'm not feeling right, can I go home?" He looked up, concern immediately crinkling his brow. "Yeah, of course. Take it easy, okay? Want me to come with?" I shook my head. "I'll be fine. Just need to rest." At home, the quiet was a relief, but my mind raced. This wasn't just fatigue or stress. On a hunch, I found an old pregnancy test in the bathroom cabinet. Waiting for the result, my heart pounded not just with hope, but a flicker of fear. Positive. The word seemed to leap out at me. I was pregnant. I couldn't wait to tell Jack. When he came home, his face lit up like the 4th of July. "Really? That's incredible, Lil." His excitement was a bomb, making everything feel just right. But the good news quickly turned my life at the restaurant upside down. Susan, ever the overseer, took the pregnancy as her new project. My workload was cut down, which I appreciated, but that came with her scrutinizing every bite I ate. "No soda, Lillian. Here, have some water. You need to stay hydrated for the baby," she would chide, pushing a glass towards me as if I were a child. She even tagged along to my antenatal checkups. Standing next to the doctor like she was part of the medical team, she'd ask, "Is she eating right? Are the baby's measurements normal?" The doctor, used to nervous grandparents, reassured her, but Susan's vigilance only intensified. "We just need to be sure everything is perfect," she'd say, making me feel less like a soon-to-be mom and more like a walking incubator. Even Jack started echoing his mother, his words and ways morphing into a version of Susan. "Mom's right, you know. We just want what's best for the baby," he'd tell me when I expressed frustration. When our son was born, I thought maybe things would get better, that Susan and Jack's fixation would ease up now that the baby was here, healthy and perfect. But it only shifted gears. They doted on him to an extreme, hanging on his every gurgle and fuss, while I was nudged to the side, my role seemingly fulfilled. As they spoiled him with endless toys and attention, I tried to set boundaries, only to be overridden. "He's our heir, Lillian. He deserves the best." Jack would dismiss my concerns, parroting his mother's justifications. Feeling increasingly isolated, I poured myself back into work at the restaurant, where Susan's grip seemed to tighten. "Good, now that you've had the baby, you can focus here again. We need all hands on deck," she told me, as if my maternity leave was just a brief hiatus. It hurt, feeling reduced to just a role I could play in their plans, mother to the heir, worker in the family business. But I swallowed the pain, focusing on my son, determined to give him the love and balance his father and grandmother seemed to forget. The joy of finding out I was pregnant again was unlike the first time. This time, both Jack and Susan were equally thrilled, hoping for another heir who could one day help run the family restaurant. Everything felt like it was falling into place. "Ethan's going to be a big brother," Jack said, smiling as he watched Ethan play. "He'll have someone to teach all his tricks to." Susan was more practical, but no less excited. "Another strong boy in the family would be perfect. Let's hope for a smooth pregnancy." Things changed when my second son, Jamie, was born. He was a large baby, robust and seemingly healthy, but as months passed, it was clear he wasn't developing like Ethan had. He was slower to reach milestones such as talking and walking. Concerned, I took him to see several specialists. After numerous tests and consultations, the diagnosis was clear: Jamie had developmental delays. The specialists were optimistic, though. "With regular therapy and support, Jamie can still lead a normal life," one of them assured me. "He's not less, just different, and he needs your support." I clung to that hope, but Jack and Susan reacted differently. "This doesn't make sense," Jack muttered after one appointment. "He doesn't even look like Ethan did at that age." Susan was more blunt, her words cutting deeply. "Are you sure he's even Jack's son? He doesn't look like anyone in our family." I was stunned. "What are you saying, Susan? Of course, he's Jack's. How can you even suggest such a thing?" Their skepticism grew into something uglier. Jack's warmth toward Jamie cooled, and Susan outright suggested we minimize spending on Jamie's therapies. "Why waste money on something that's not even certain? He's not going to be what we hoped," she said coldly one evening as we discussed finances. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "He's your grandson," I countered, my voice shaky with anger. "He needs us, and I'm not going to let him down." Susan's response was even more shocking. "Maybe it would be best if he were placed in a facility that can handle his kind." I felt as though she had slapped me. "That's not an option. He's my son, our son, and he stays with his family." Despite the lack of support, I devoted myself to Jamie's development, spending every penny I could save on therapies and special classes. It was exhausting and expensive, but watching Jamie make progress, no matter how small, was worth every sacrifice. Ethan, bless his heart, became Jamie's protector and biggest cheerleader. "Look, Jamie can almost write his name." Ethan would proudly show off Jamie's scribbles to anyone who would look. "He's doing great, thanks to you helping him so much," I would tell Ethan, grateful for his maturity and kindness, qualities that seemed scarce in our home. As years slipped by, Oliver's journey with his specialists began to bear fruit. His intellect nearly caught up with his peers, a milestone that filled my heart with pride. Physically, he was a powerhouse, his strength eclipsing the more delicate build of his older brother, Ethan, who had since moved to college in another city. "Keep up the good work, bro," Ethan had told Oliver, hugging him tightly before he left. "Hit those books hard, just like I did." Oliver took his brother's words to heart, balancing his studies diligently. However, it wasn't just the books that caught Oliver's attention, but the allure of the baseball field. His physical prowess hadn't gone unnoticed. The high school baseball coach saw him during gym class and immediately saw potential. "You've got a strong arm there, Oliver. Ever thought of playing baseball seriously?" he had asked, an encouraging smile on his face. I remember feeling a surge of hope when Oliver shared the news. Sports could be another piece of his rehabilitation, a way to build confidence, teamwork skills, and physical health. However, when Jack learned of this, his reaction was as cold as a winter squall. "Baseball? That's the last thing he needs. He's going to work in the restaurant, we need a maintenance worker. That's his future, not playing some pointless game," he declared one evening after dinner, his tone brooking no argument. Susan, ever his echo, added her own harsh words. "And he's hardly got the brains for sports. He needs to focus on simple, practical work. It's all he's suited for." But Oliver's crushed look that evening settled it for me. I wasn't going to let Jack's or Susan's narrow views stifle my son's potential. I met with the coach the next day, explaining the situation. I want Oliver to play. He needs this. Can we keep it just between us? Coach Thompson nodded, understanding flashing in his eyes. We'll make it work. He can come to the early morning sessions before school, and I'll keep him off the game roster for now. Let's just get him playing, get him involved. So, we started our little conspiracy. I bought Oliver a uniform, hiding it in an old backpack I found in the attic. You're doing something good, Mom. Thanks for standing up for me, Oliver whispered one morning as he geared up for his first secret practice. Oliver thrived. With each practice, I saw more of the joy that sports brought him, how it transformed him, how his teammates accepted and cheered for him, how he laughed and high-fived after a good play. It was a world apart from the stifling air of the restaurant, a breath of fresh freedom that Oliver deserved. The day everything fell apart started just like any other at the restaurant. I was in the front, dealing with the lunchtime rush, when I realized we were low on napkins. Heading to the back room to grab another pack, I stumbled upon a scene that stopped me dead in my tracks. There was Oliver, struggling under the weight of a beer keg, his face red with effort. Jack was there, overseeing the work with a cold detachment that made my blood boil. Oliver, put that down right now. I screamed, my heart pounding with fear and anger. Jack turned to me, annoyance flickering across his face. He's fine, Lillian. He needs to learn what real work is. Real work? He's just a kid, Jack. And those kegs are way too heavy for him. I shot back, rushing over to help Oliver set the keg down safely. Jack scoffed, dismissing me with a wave of his hand. He's strong, stronger than he is smart. That's all he's good for, manual labor. His words sliced through me, but before I could respond, he added, besides, it's not like he's my own son. For all I know, you had him with someone else. I stared at him, stunned into silence for a moment. What did you just say? My voice was low, dangerous. You heard me. No ancestors of mine would be as dumb as him, Jack sneered, turning back to oversee the rest of the unloading. Tears of rage blurred my vision, but I wiped them away quickly. After school, Oliver is going to college, just like Ethan. He's your son, Jack, and he deserves your support, not your insults. At that moment, Susan walked in, her timing as impeccable as ever. Catching the tail end of our conversation, she laughed, a harsh, grating sound. College? Him? Don't be stupid, Lillian. He's retarded, all he's good for is carrying kegs of beer. I left them in the storeroom, their laughter echoing in my ears as I drove straight to the clinic to request the DNA test results I'd secretly had done weeks ago, unable to bear the gnawing doubt Jack had planted. When I returned with the envelope, my hands trembled as I handed it to Jack. Read it, I demanded. His smugness faltered as he tore it open, his eyes scanning the contents. His face went white as he read the conclusion, Oliver was indeed his biological son. Susan peered over his shoulder, her face contorting with disbelief. This doesn't change anything. There's no stupidity in our family. He's not going to college. Jack's response was cruel, dismissive. He's not getting a dime from me for college. He's more used to us here. Something inside me broke then. I couldn't bear the thought of my son suffering any more under their disdain. I can't do this anymore. I want a divorce, I said, the words tasting of freedom and fear. Jack's reply was cold, immediate. Fine. Pack your things and get out of my house. Packing was a blur, every folded shirt and stuffed toy a nail in the coffin of my marriage. As we drove away, the weight of years of disdain and struggle seemed to lift slightly. We arrived in the city where Ethan was at college. He had rented a small apartment off campus, and when I called him about our situation, he didn't hesitate. Stay with me, Mom. There's not a lot of space, but we'll make it work. Seeing Ethan again lifted our spirits. He opened the door, and pulling us both into a hug, he said, whatever you need, I'm here. Job hunting was next. I pounded the pavement, handed out resumes, and finally landed a job at a local restaurant. It wasn't anything fancy, but the owner, Mike, was understanding and supportive. "I heard about your situation, Lillian. You start whenever you're ready," he told me on my first day. Oliver started at a new school and joined the baseball team immediately. Watching him put on his new uniform, I felt a swell of pride. He was smiling again, his confidence returning. Life had settled into a new, happier rhythm. Oliver was growing into a fine young man, excelling in school and on the baseball field. His dedication and natural talent eventually caught the eyes of scouts, and by the time he graduated from high school, he had an offer that would change his life forever. He came home one afternoon, a broad smile plastered across his face, waving a letter in the air. "Mom, you won't believe it," he exclaimed, barely able to keep still. "What is it, honey?" I asked, wiping my hands on a kitchen towel as I turned from the stove. "I got it, Mom. The contract from the Phoenix Bats, remember, the big league baseball team? They want me to join them." His eyes sparkled with excitement and disbelief. I felt a rush of emotions, from joy to overwhelming pride. "Oh, Oliver. That's wonderful. I knew you could do it." I pulled him into a tight hug, feeling his heart racing with excitement. "Yeah, they want me to start training with them next month. I'll be traveling a lot, to different cities, playing against the best of the best," he explained, his voice tinged with a nervous energy. As Oliver traveled and competed, I watched every game I could on TV, often alone in the quiet of the living room after a long day at the restaurant. Each game he played was a testament to his resilience and determination. Meanwhile, Ethan was carving out his own path with remarkable success. After graduating from college with honors, he landed a job at a leading mobile application company. Within a year, he was leading projects and making a name for himself in the tech industry. As for me, life had taken a turn for the better in more ways than one. I continued to work at the restaurant where Mike, my boss, had been a constant source of support and kindness. Over time, our relationship grew into something deeper. We married quietly in a small ceremony attended by Ethan, Oliver, and a few close friends. "Lillian, you've made me the happiest man," Mike said during our wedding, his eyes shining with love and sincerity. Under Mike's encouragement, I took on more responsibilities at the restaurant, eventually becoming the manager. My days were long and often challenging, but fulfilling. I had a purpose, a supportive family, and a partner who stood by me. The day was filled with excitement and a bit of nervous energy. My youngest son, Oliver, had called weeks ago to tell us his baseball team was playing right here in our city. "You have to come, Mom. It's a big game," he had said, his voice bubbling with enthusiasm. Mike, Ethan, and I arrived at the stadium, the stands buzzing with anticipation. We found our seats just as the game was starting, and the energy from the crowd was electric. Oliver was on fire that day, his pitches clean and strong. The game was tight, but in the end, Oliver's team clinched the win thanks to his record-breaking throw. It was the strongest throw in the history of the team, and the crowd went wild, standing and cheering as Oliver was congratulated by his teammates and coaches. As the applause continued, a disturbance at the edge of the field caught everyone's attention. An elderly bald man and an older woman made their way onto the field, the former waving some papers in the air. The camera panned to them, their images appearing on the big screen. It was Jack and Susan. "That's our boy. Our blood," Jack shouted as he tried to reach Oliver. Oliver stopped and stared at them, then took a step back as Jack reached out to hug him. Oliver's voice was firm and carried over the microphone. "No, you are not my dad. My family is my mom, my brother, and Mike, whom I love." The audience burst into applause, supporting Oliver's stand. Susan, never one to give up easily, started yelling, "We want your money. You owe us." Oliver shook his head, resolute. "I owe you nothing. You were never there for me when I needed you." Security quickly intervened, escorting Jack and Susan off the field while the crowd cheered Oliver's bravery and honesty. As we prepared to leave the stadium, Jack and Susan, having been ejected, were waiting by the gate. "The restaurant's gone under. We need help, Lillian. Jack pleaded, desperation in his voice. No, Jack. It's over. You made your choices, I replied, feeling Ethan's hand squeeze my shoulder in support. Jack's face turned red with anger, and he stepped towards me, but Mike stepped in front of me protectively. You need to leave and stay out of their lives, he said firmly. Jack hesitated, glanced at the security nearby, and finally backed down. Susan, defeated, followed him. As we walked away, Ethan hugged me tight. You okay, Mom? Yes, honey, I'm fine, I assured him, taking a moment to look back at Oliver, who was signing autographs for young fans, his smile bright and free. And I realized that I'm the happy person,